Hello and welcome to the University of Southern California's online Master of Public Administration Student Spotlight webinar. My name is Timothy Voss in the Admissions Department, and today we have with us Kristin Matheny, our student speaker. Kristin will be speaking about her experience during and after the MPA program and provide us insight into the MPA. I will then explain the admissions process, and we will answer your questions at the end of the presentation. I will now hand it over to Kristin. Kristin?
Hi, everybody. My name is Kristin Matheny, and I actually just recently graduated from the MPA program at USC. I was actually finished in last December after I completed my capstone, but you can only walk across the stage and formally graduate in May. So I was able to do that in May. And I am not in Los Angeles. I'm actually in Florida. So I'll talk about that. So we had to fly out for graduation. But I guess I'll backtrack and tell you a little bit about some of the things that were going through my mind and a little bit about my career situation before I joined the program, which, as I understand, a lot of you are thinking about joining the program and applying. So I'll talk a little bit about what happened before USC. So that's a picture of me. This is a little bit about what happened, how I made the decision, because I know you probably have a lot of questions going through your mind. It's quite a process, and it's a huge decision to make. It's a decision that, it affects your lifestyle, it affects your schedule, it affects your finances, it even affects your relationships when you go back to school because, all of a sudden, everything's kind of in upheaval. So this is a little bit about why I chose this particular program and why I chose to go back to school. So as I said, I'm actually a born and raised South Floridian. I was born in West Palm Beach, and I now live just west of Fort Lauderdale. So that's actually where I am right now. But somewhere in between, I actually got out of the state of Florida to get my BA from Tulane University, and that was back in 2004. It feels like forever ago. But I left. I went to New Orleans, and in that time, I graduated with a double major in English and in Latin American Studies. And my focus in Latin American Studies is actually Cuba and U.S.-Cuban relations, Cuban politics. I think a lot of that had to do with my roots in South Florida. I'm actually not Cuban American, but I was, part of the community in many ways. I did a lot of volunteer work with people who had just moved to the United States from Cuba. So it was a passion of mine to do that. And also an English degree I knew was probably a bit more practical than a Latin American Studies degree, or so I thought. So I combined the two. And as it says here on the slide, I had some heavy interest in both U.S. politics and in Cuban politics, as well as U.S.-Cuban relations. I actually studied abroad in Havana, Cuba, at the University of Havana, and I studied politics, which, at the time, especially in 2003, 2004, there wasn't a lot of relationship between the U.S. and Cuba. So, things were very, very strained. Things have changed since then a little bit, but, I found it very interesting. And at the time, I got really involved in local, state, and then ultimately national politics. And that sort of happened in college. It was something that sparked in me then. It wasn't something I was particularly interested in before. I grew up in kind of an apolitical family, and it was something that really became a passion of mine. So after college, I came back to South Florida, and I spent about a decade working on political campaigns. Actually, my first job out of college was working on a presidential campaign. So I spent about a decade doing campaign work. I worked in communications. I did some policy consulting, and I always tell people that working in politics doesn't really pay the bills because you only work about every 2 years. So I had to make ends meet, and I taught high school English and debate in Miami. So once I moved back to South Florida, I worked on political campaigns at every level, national, state, and local. I taught I ended up getting married. I had a couple of children. And at some point, after I had my second child, I kind of felt like I needed to go back to school. And so the next thing I wanted to tell you about was my decision leading up to why I wanted to go back and get an MPA, because at the time I wasn't completely sure of what degree I wanted to get. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do something in poli-sci. So I came to the conclusion that I wanted an MPA and that it was probably something I needed. Some of the bigger, broader reasons were that it's an incredibly versatile degree. What I like about an MPA is that it kind of takes elements of different master's degrees, management degrees. It's similar to an MBA in that way. There's an element of poli-sci. You get some communications. There are elements of finance and economics. And so I wanted something broad, something I could apply, because at that point, after working in politics for 10 years, honestly, I was a little sick of politics. I'm sure we all are at this point. But I decided I wanted to focus on policy, but I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't know if that meant consulting. I didn't know if that meant going back and, teaching college-level students. I didn't know if that meant working in news production, which is ultimately where I led, but I had no idea at the time. So this degree was something very versatile, and that was an easy decision for me. Like it says here, there's a tremendous real-world application. With an MPA, you can work in the public sector, you can work in the private sector, you can work in the nonprofit sector. I mean, your options aren't limited by anything. Whereas, some degrees are geared, like, for example, an MBA is geared more towards work in the private sector. This one just felt unlimited. And then this degree is like an MBA, which a lot of people are more familiar with. In terms of management coursework, you build skills in communications and finance, but there seems to be a sharper focus on career work that involves the public sector and the private sector. So I kind of thought it was applicable no matter where I went. And I think a lot of my classmates and my cohort, I think they felt the same way. So, if we get a little deeper, there were some personal reasons why I decided to get an MPA. First of all, the timing was right. And I know, a lot of people, sometimes people go back to graduate school later on in life. For a lot of people, it's like a mid-career change. Some people want to change direction, which is kind of where I was headed. A lot of people go to graduate school right after they graduate with their undergraduate degree. So for me, I had just hit my 30s. The timing felt right. My children were getting older. And this degree felt, like I put here, a missing piece in many ways, because I felt like I'd worked in politics, I worked in the public sector, and there was something about policy work and the nonprofit sector that drew me in. It was just something I didn't know anything about, and it was kind of a mystery to me, to be honest with you. But I really liked policy work, I learned, just from working in politics, and I kind of felt like that's where real change was made. So, I didn't have a real firm idea. Sometimes people have very firm ideas about where they're going to take it. I didn't have that. I kind of just thought it would develop when I got my MPA, and it actually did. I'm happy to say it worked out. But this was about learning things that I otherwise would not have had the opportunity to learn. So this was more about gaining an education and less about a promotion or something like that, although all of those are good reasons to get an MPA. And I put some of the reasons here: career advancement, promotion, leadership opportunities. A lot of people who go back and get their MPA end up running for public office or becoming city managers, which, those are excellent goals. Helping others. A lot of people, particularly in the nonprofit track, are very values-driven and very mission-driven, which is completely honorable and, a great reason for wanting to get an MPA. Career change, knowledge. A lot of people getting MPAs want to save the world or save society. So, I think these are all valid reasons for wanting to go back and get an MPA. It's like I said, it's very versatile. So let's see the next slide. So so then the next natural question is, why would you want to do this online? Because I hesitated. I went to college in a time where an online education wasn't really a thing yet in the early 2000s. It was expected that if you went to college on a brick and mortar campus. And online college really wasn't very popular. It became popular once I started working. And, to some extent, there's a stigma around going to school online because I think people tend to think that it's somehow less of a degree because you're not sitting in a classroom. And I mean, spoiler alert, that's not true at all. And I'll explain to you hopefully why I think online might actually be better than a brick and mortar campus. But, I hesitated, and I know that's a concern. Like I remember telling my husband that I wanted to get this degree and I was thinking about going to USC and doing it online, and he kind of looked at me sideways. And so, I approached the issue carefully, and I talked to the admissions counselors. I actually got in touch with a few alums, and I talked to them, and here's kind of the reason why I decided to go with the online route. So where I live in South Florida, there's no opportunity to go to a school like USC and to be part of a program as highly ranked as the MPA program at the Full Price School. So, we have a lot of really wonderful universities here in South Florida, and I know that that's the case in a lot of metro areas across the United States and certainly abroad. But USC is so highly ranked. It's so well respected. There's such an alumni network, and the professors are, among the best in their, respective fields. And I just thought to myself that these MPA programs, like, for example, I live 20 minutes from a big school. They have an MPA program, and it's a good program. I mean, it's pretty well ranked. It's a short drive away, but this program and others in my area just didn't even compare to USC's in terms of ranking, in terms of, in terms of the curriculum and the opportunity you get being a student. To me, it seemed obvious. But the other reason, and I think this is probably a more practical reason, is that I was busy, and I recognized that I was very busy. A lot of us in the MPA program, most of my friends were not freshly graduated, with their BAs, and I think that being busy, the online platform works very well because, for example, I'm a full-time parent. I have 2 young boys. I was very heavily involved in local politics. I did a lot of volunteer work. I still do. And at the time, all through my experience in the program, I was actually a fellow with a public policy think tank here in Florida. So I also had a part-time job. And there just wasn't enough time for me to have a commute to Miami or to Fort Lauderdale. It just seemed like such a burden. And there's also this classroom requirement that also seemed like a burden. So I really wanted the structure of a traditional MPA program, which meant a real program that exists on a brick and mortar campus, and that sort of curriculum with the flexibility of being able to work at odd hours. And I worked at very odd hours, and I'll talk to you guys a little bit about that. But I really needed to be able to work in the middle of the night if I had to, or get up early and do my work, or work, during a lunch break. And so this program is practical for that reason. It's exactly like a traditional MPA program, but the schedule flexibility to me is what sold it. It was extremely valuable. So the next thing after I considered why online is, next slide. So why USC? Because obviously there are several programs that are excellent and highly ranked, and USC wasn't the only program I applied to, although it was my first choice. So I ended up choosing USC for a few very big reasons. First of all, the networking aspect. The joke at USC is that when you graduate, you become part of the Trojan Mafia. The Trojan Mafia is a real thing, and it's when you walk into an office or, you're at an event, a cocktail party, whatever, and you're telling people that you went to USC, there's always someone in the room that went there. There's always someone in the room that, throws up the hand sign and says fight on. So there's this tremendous networking opportunity, an incredible alumni network. The second to none. Nothing compared to my undergraduate university. So there were a few other reasons too. The Capstone project intrigued me, and I'll talk plenty about that later. But also this particular program, there was a focus on client-based projects. And that interested me too, because as somebody who was coming in without a lot of experience working with public policy and in the nonprofit sector generally, I felt like to give myself, a leg up and a little bit of clout, I needed client-based projects. I needed to actually work for foundations, nonprofits. I wanted to do these projects, talk to these people, and really roll my sleeves up. And so this is something that's unique to USC. Not a lot of programs offer that. And then, of course, the breadth of the coursework. Obviously, I picked a nonprofit track, and I know, there are many questions often about did I pick the right track. I wondered the same thing too. The track is, you can change your track too later on, but the track is pretty secondary because you really do get a little bit of local government, a little bit of leadership, public policy, nonprofit. You kind of get everything. It's a focus, but certainly most of my classes didn't involve nonprofits. It was just a focus on, for some of my, some of the more secondary coursework that I did. And then, of course, resources. USC is a top-tier research university. Obviously, as a student, you get access to all of the libraries. You get access to everything at USC. It's no different than if you were on campus. And to me, that meant a lot. The reputation and the ranking, and I'll talk about that in a second, but there's just no beating USC if this is the program you want to do. And then, of course, I put here a few personal reasons. So my husband's actually from Los Angeles, and his family, they all went to UCLA. So it was kind of like a little running joke in the family that I would go to USC. I didn't even apply to UCLA. But, I had personal reasons for wanting to go there too. Some people I highly respected, were Trojans. And I just, I felt like this was the right choice for both practical and for personal reasons. So, so on the next slide, so this is the networking and Trojan family slide. And it's funny because this picture is actually from a residency about a little over a year ago. I'm in the back. You can't really see me too well. I'm kind of standing in the back. This was from a Capstone case study challenge that we did, which is just another example of something that you get to do at USC. Everybody flies to campus for these residencies. And I remember thinking to myself, when I was told that there was a residency requirement, I remember thinking, I hope that doesn't become a burden. Do I have to leave my family, take days off work? Actually, those were the most magical moments of my time at USC. And I think most Trojans feel that way. Most people in the online MPA program feel that way because you're together and you're already close to all of these people. The networking is unbelievable. But you get to actually, connect with people face to face. And so, it says here the Price School has over 19,000 alumni. A lot of those people show up for these residencies. This is actually a case challenge. It was a competition. So we got to present, we got to do these presentations. It felt in many ways, like it was client-based. So there is also a lot of opportunity for internships and externships. Like this is a campus residency. This is an example of a residency. Of course, you connect in each of most classes do weekly live chat, sometimes more than once a week, but usually it's once a week or every other week. And that's a wonderful opportunity to connect. Most of the projects, and I'll address this too, are team projects or group projects, which scared me at first. I'm a true introvert in a lot of ways, and so the idea of doing group work kind of terrified me in the beginning. By the end, I actually preferred it, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that. The Career Services Center, which I relied on heavily for my resume building towards the end of the program and after. Job search resources, same thing, and a career mentor. I loved mine. So, hopefully if you do decide to, take advantage of these resources, they'll be as helpful to you as they were to me. And then programs and events, obviously, if you're ever in Los Angeles, if you live there, or if you're ever there even during residency, there are always fun tailgating events and opportunities for you to have dinner or drinks with professors and to network with alums once you graduate. So there's always something going on at USC. And, I'm lucky my in-laws actually live in Los Angeles, and I have a lot of friends there. So whenever I go out there, I feel like kind of like my home base is now USC. I don't feel like it's a stranger place to me. It feels like home, even though I did most of this work in Florida. Just the campus feels like home. It's a great campus if you've never visited it, by the way. So on the next slide, I think the next thing that I discuss is, the idea of getting an MPA online at USC to me was a little bit like the perfect storm. It just seemed like this is the obvious choice, like I've said. And then these are just kind of the current rankings of the MPA program itself at USC. The Price School has worldwide recognition as a leader, and then, of course, everybody trusts the U.S. News and World Report. And we were just recently ranked 4th, the Price School, in terms of public affairs. And then, of course, here are some of the rankings below, and they're really impressive. For example, the program I did, the nonprofit management track, was 6th in the country. Obviously we're in the top 10 in so many areas. So to me, this is kind of the best of all of the worlds. Simply because of this, I think this is a good reason to go to USC and to do it online. You have this at your fingertips, whether you live there or not. You no longer have to live in the city where you attend school, and I mean that's incredibly, incredibly valuable. So on the next slide, next slide. So now I'm going to talk about the coursework and the program generally. So most of the coursework, as I mentioned before, includes client-based projects. And these, every student within this program has, the things that they thought were very, very helpful. To me, these were very helpful because I had never worked in a nonprofit, like I said, and I'd never actually worked with public policy. I'd only done some volunteer work. So these client-based projects actually took a front and center role on my resume after I graduated and I started looking for a job. And they were, very impressive projects. Some of them, we actually had to obtain the clients ourselves. And in some cases, they were given to us based on our interests or just completely randomly. And I'll talk about some of those projects later. I made a list of some of the projects I've done. But the next note on here is group work versus independent work. As a bit of an introvert, the thought of doing group work terrified me. And I wondered at the time how group work was going to happen when everybody lived all around the country. And believe me when I tell you that that's completely beside the point. There are so many ways to network, and you actually learn a little bit about technology, networking, and collaboration technology in this program. There were things like Basecamp, if you've ever used Basecamp, Prezi, Pathbright, VoiceThread. Google Hangouts is something I'd never had to use before. So, I almost felt closer to my group than I ever felt working with a group, in person. Certainly in college, you don't bond with people the way you're in constant contact. Especially there's kind of this extra added layer of feeling forced to connect with people, even though they live across the country. I mean, I worked with people who were in Europe and Canada, My capstone project, and I'll talk about that later, I was in Florida. We had 2 members who were in California and 1 in North Carolina. And the one in North Carolina was traveling constantly. So, having to connect was huge. And the idea of group work no longer terrifies me, which is huge because I actually, the job that I recently got, there's a lot of collaborative work. And so I'm no longer intimidated by it because of this program. I mean, I really give credit to this program for kind of, ripping that Band-Aid off. And then again, I can't stress enough the residencies, the continuing student residencies, huge opportunities to network, chances to really get to know your professors. Obviously, you get to know them during the live sessions and you're communicating constantly. But, this is really a chance to kind of bond with them. And then, the online live sessions versus classrooms. Most of the people in the program joke around that you actually get to know your classmates better this way than we ever did in a brick and mortar school. For example, I have some classmates who I graduated months ago. I still talk to some of them every day. We've become, close friends because of this program. And I think there's, like I said, there's so much opportunity for you to talk and kind of the fear factor is taken away. When you're in a classroom, you're not constantly talking to other people. You kind of go to the classroom, you put your books down, you take your notes, you listen to the professor, and you leave. And then maybe if you have a group project, you collaborate, and then you separate. You take your tests, and the course is done. In this program, the program is actually so small, you're with people over and over again. You have opportunity to do group work, but, the classroom doesn't exist. So while the professor is talking, you're interacting in a sort of a live chat box, you're talking to each other, and you truthfully, you get to know people better than you ever would have in a classroom. That's the way that I felt. And then finally, as I had mentioned before, technology, all of these different programs I had never used before. I'd never even heard of some of them before. And now I've started bringing them to my own work. Things like Basecamp, Prezi. We use Basecamp constantly in the Capstone, during our Capstone project. It's a wonderful project management application. But, I just feel like I'm so much more aware of the technology because this program was online. And, those are valuable things that I can bring to my employer, my future employers. And it's just, it's another example of how this program will change you for the better, because all of a sudden you acquire these new skills that you just wouldn't have learned inside, a regular classroom. So I think the next slide is actually just pictures, because I wanted to kind of, there we go. So so these are, I'm really bad at taking pictures. I tend to forget to do them. So these are mostly pictures taken by other people. So the first picture up above is actually, I flew to San Francisco during Capstone. I was there for a wedding, and it's just a picture of me and one of my classmates who I'd become very, very good friends with, Susanna. And she's actually from San Francisco, and she showed me around San Francisco, so that's just a fun picture of us. The next one up at the top is, it's actually, I think I'm the one speaking. So this is that Capstone Case Challenge residency, and you're put into a group with, it's groups of 3 or 4. So in our case, it was a group of 4, and we were given a problem. Everybody at the residency was given a problem. And last year, that problem was the homeless crisis in Sacramento. And so there were actually people who worked within city government, and people who worked within city government in Los Angeles came, and they actually judged our presentations. And so what we all had to do is we all had to come up with creative solutions to addressing the problem. And in our case, it was homelessness. I think this past year, the case challenge was the opioid epidemic. And so, every year this case challenge competition, it forces you out of your comfort zone. You're forced to work with people over the course of a day or 2, but you become really close. Everybody in that picture, I talk to regularly. So this is just a list of project titles that I've done, and it's not exhaustive, but just to give you an idea of what you would be doing. Up at the top, a wicked problem, Sacramento's homeless problem, and a place-based people solution. And I won't go through all the titles, but as you can see, there's quite a breadth of topics here. I did some financial analyses. The second one on the list was actually something, I actually chose this particular organization. It was for a nonprofit track course, and we had to do a financial analysis for the institution, whichever one we picked. And I was a little intimidated by this because I'd never done a financial analysis before, but it actually ended up helping the organization quite a bit. I chose a children's museum in Naples, which is just right across the state from me, and I actually drove there and I met with the CFO, the CEO, and I was able to complete this project, and they were helped out tremendously because they had never done a financial analysis. So that was a really wonderful opportunity and something I would not have had somewhere else. And then some of these other projects, different financial analyses, as you can see, they run the gamut. I also did a strategic plan. I loved, there was a class I took, strategic planning, one of my favorite classes in the program, but I worked with a team and we picked a nonprofit that builds homes for wounded veterans who return home for their families. And so, this particular multi-step strategic plan, it included some financial analysis. Yeah. And then, if you keep going down, down at the bottom, there's a financial analysis for the Cuban American National Foundation, which is obviously very close to my heart. So, you get to do things like this all the time in this program. And so the next slide is there you go. So the Capstone project. So I'll zoom through this a little bit. My particular capstone was about intelligent policing. If you've seen the movie Minority Report, it's basically that. An investigation of implicit bias with special regard for law enforcement and intelligent policing technology. And so in a nutshell, what we did was we were given a project where we had to work with a company. It was a private organization that produced a predictive policing tool. So basically what they were looking for was how to predict crime before it happens, and they decided to beta test this particular program in Birmingham, Alabama, of all places. So it was actually, I think it was the first time that a capstone group had to actually go to the location where the client was. So we flew to Birmingham, and we did some on-site interviews. We got to actually see the system in play. And then we actually flew last December towards the end of our project. We flew to Los Angeles where the client's headquarters is, and we presented our findings to the client. And I know a lot of capstone groups get to do that, actually like a physical presentation. So I think the next slide is a picture of, oh wait, nope, not yet. So yeah, so this is just more about the capstone. I guess I already talked about that. So the next slide is actually a photo of my capstone team. There we are. I'm on the right, and if you can see, the picture I'm holding up is actually our professor and our mentor, and we were joking around she couldn't be there with us, and we said it was almost like she was always with us, so we brought a picture of her. But we're outside the Jefferson County Jail, which is in Birmingham, Alabama, and this is where we conducted most of our on-site interviews about the program to see how things were. We were actually looking for implicit bias in the program, which is what the client wanted us to do. But yeah, so we ended up having a great time. We were there for a few days, and then about a month later, we flew out. Once we had our findings, we flew out to LA and presented, and that was actually the end of our capstone project. So on the next slide, these are a couple pictures of what we saw in Birmingham, Alabama. The threat deterrence system, this is where it's being beta tested in Birmingham. And so as you can see there, there's rows of computers. This is inside the sheriff's office. And so this is, where we conducted our interviews, just to give you an idea of what we did. And so after this, like I said, I'm going in chronological order. This is graduation, and this is the end game. I mean, this is really what you're going for. Up at the top, that's a picture of most of my Capstone team. We had one team member that wasn't able to come to graduation, but that's 3 of us, and we're obviously really happy that it's, that it's a little sad and a little happy. It's pretty bittersweet. And then on the right is a picture of the reality of being a grad student with 2 young children. They didn't want to be there, and it was very hot that day. But, just some pictures of graduation, kind of it's kind of like a nice reward at the end of everything, especially at the end of Capstone. So where did I go with all of this? And on the next slide, this is something that is particularly passionate, an area of passion for me. So I love listening to podcasts. I actually got into podcasts as an escape when I was in graduate school, and I listened to science podcasts, political podcasts, true crime podcasts. I know those are very popular. The more I listen to political podcasts and news podcasts, I was actually at a residency, one of the residencies last year, and I was talking to a professor of mine and a couple of students, and I was kind of lamenting that I felt like there was no truly independent political or policy-based podcast. Everything seemed really biased, and of course I was just coming off of our Capstone project, which was all about bias. We were investigating bias, so I felt like I had a really tough time finding, really getting facts. And, podcasting is one of these areas. It's kind of an emerging form of entertainment. We're kind of getting out of the blogging era, and we're moving on to podcasts. And I highly recommend you get into them if you haven't yet. They're incredibly versatile. But so I thought, and I wrestled with the idea of doing my own podcast. I actually tried to get a friend of mine from the program to host it because I didn't want to host it. I said, I'll write for it and you host it. And he said, no, you need to host it. So that's what I did. And so this is something that, this is a project I worked on right after Capstone, of course, because I was so busy. I started working on learning about how to podcast. I started, getting the equipment ready. I found a professional editor, and I actually launched my own podcast in May. It actually launched just a few days before I walked across the stage at USC, which is kind of interesting. But so this is just a screenshot. It's available on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and it's a completely, it's as unbiased as I could be. It's an unbiased, sort of nonpartisan look at serious policy issues, and it was completely inspired by my time at USC. A lot of the topics are suggested by some of my classmates and friends. A lot of them were inspired by projects I did at USC, different topics. And actually, a lot of the experts that I've interviewed on the podcast are USC students and friends from USC, professors. So the next slide just kind of shows you, this is just our little tagline, stop being spoon-fed your opinions. And on the left, these are just, I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are some of the topics that I've covered on the podcast. So we're actually, episode 10 is down at the bottom. It's an unfiltered look at public policy and natural disasters. So it's kind of relevant right now, especially being in South Florida. But that one will actually be available on Monday. And you can see the topics. The first one, bias, the bigger problem below the surface. I mean, that was directly inspired by my Capstone. And I actually interviewed my Capstone teammates. The fighting the opioid epidemic, which is about halfway down, that one was actually a suggestion by a friend of mine in the program. It was something that they focused a lot on as a policy issue in the last case challenge. So, I mean, all of these topics are inspired by something I did at USC or something somebody did. And so this is very closely tied to my experience. And then on the next slide, you'll see some of the information in case you'd like to subscribe or listen to the podcast. You can just click on any of those links. I also have a website, and I have a Twitter account and a Facebook account. I try to stay up with it. Sometimes I don't have time, but I do the best I can. But so each episode is a biweekly podcast. Episodes drop every other Monday. And, so, depending on if you have an iPhone or an Android or anything, you can probably access the Policy Scout. But, give it a listen, tell me what you think. I'm not too sensitive, so, I'm always looking to improve. So by all means, reach out and tell me what you think. And if you have a good, policy topic idea, I'm always looking for new ideas. You start to run out after a while. But and then finally, my last slide is, where am I going next? So after a job search that it felt like it lasted forever, but it really didn't. I interviewed for a position at Newsmax. So to give you kind of a little bit of background quickly about that, I was actually found by the CEO of Newsmax. And the reason, and I'm not just saying this, the reason why he found me and he asked if for an interview was because of my degree, my recent MPA from USC. He also has an MPA, not from USC, but he was impressed by that. And so it was directly related to that. He actually found me on LinkedIn, of all places. And he called me and he said, well, we don't have, any positions available, but we'd like to have you on the team. We're impressed by your degree and your knowledge of, policy and politics. So I went in for an interview and they actually created a position for me. And so on Monday, I'm going to be starting as their new coordinating producer at the Newsmax TV station. It's a large cable news network. So it's available, if you have cable or dish or something like that, it's available so you can watch. I won't actually be on camera. I'll be behind the scenes. So I guess that's everything I have to talk about. Hopefully you have some questions for me. I'd love to answer them. And Tim will go over the admissions process now.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kristin. And we'll get to your questions here in a moment. I'm going to quickly go over admissions, but I welcome you all to set an appointment with me. I can go into detail. It's what I do here. I want to help everyone through the admissions requirements and answer questions. I could spend whatever time that you need going over these things. So I'm going to cover a couple things here, and this is also in information I can provide to you, or you may have already seen. So you would first speak to me, and most students start by starting the application because there are letter of recommendation requirements of 3. Now, on the website, it says academic. You do not need that, but you could if you want. But you'll need 3 letters of recommendation. And in the application, when you enter in the people for letters, it will send out invites for them to upload it. We will need your resume. I prefer students can email that over to me. And we can talk about transcripts, whether you have unofficials or you want to send me officials. A statement of purpose is required. I can give you great advice on the statement of purpose versus a personal statement and why it's a statement of purpose. The transcripts, I just want to stress to not send these to the campus. It will take a while to process. So please send them to my office. I'm in a satellite location. Or you can have the school email them to me directly. Now, it says here, preferred GPA of 3.0, but it does not disqualify you. There's other ways for us to add to your application. We've had plenty of students get in with below a 3.0. I can tell you how we can better your chances to get into the program. Now, the GRE waiver. So we've gotten a few questions about that. So I want to go over the GRE waiver. So the GRE waiver is typically for students with 5+ years of management experience, but it's not a requirement. There's other experience they take into consideration, like public administration related work, such as nonprofit work or government or policy, or just let me know what your background is by sending me your resume, and I can let you know if it's a good idea to apply for that GRE waiver. For the waiver, you're going to want to send me your unofficial transcripts, a resume, so you want to be detailed in your experience, and then also a small statement why you feel you should get a waiver, and then we can talk about it. GRE-wise, that is something we're not asking for a really high score. If you have a 3.0 GPA, about 50th percentile. If you're below a 3.0, we would ask for a little higher score. I can explain that. And then as you can see there, the tuition, we can cover that as well, depending on which classes that you need. Statistics is something that you can take with us. So I can explain that further when we chat. And so I wanted to also go over some deadlines. And the deadline for the spring is going to be November 15th. You can take your GRE all the way up to that day. I would prefer if you get me a request for the GRE in the next couple weeks, but that deadline is not set. But I really prefer getting those within the next 2 weeks. Your classes start on January 10th, and we'll have a residency in LA January 21st. Now that is not a set date yet, but that's our projection for that. And then someone asked here about the residency requirement. It is a requirement, and it is at the LA campus, but it's a really good experience. I know Kristin went over a little bit about it. It's a really good experience. It's very useful. You'll have one for 3 days in your first semester, and then one for a couple days in your last spring semester. But I can talk to you a little more about that when we speak. So we'll move on here to questions. I have questions from all of you, and I will answer some, and I'll have Kristin answer some as well. So Kristin, one of the questions here, and I'm going to combine actually two of the questions. So is it manageable working full-time and dealing with the rigors of pursuing a master's program at USC? And what is your time commitment per week and for projects?
Those are really good questions. So it is manageable, but it requires some, if this makes sense, it requires some scheduling proficiency. So, for example, I had a part-time, I had a fellowship, and I was traveling a little bit for the fellowship. I also, I was raising 2 children full-time, little children, young children, and I was also doing this. And, it really I depended a lot on my husband and my family, but it is manageable if you have, the ability to employ some of your time management skills. And I think it also, it varied from semester to semester. Some semesters I had a really rigorous schedule, and there just wasn't a lot of time for extras. I had to, stop doing some volunteer work. I had to really, work with my family to try to, keep things up. And there were some semesters where it was easier. Like I remember one semester I almost felt like I didn't have to change my life very much to accommodate it. And for me, that meant doing a lot of work early in the morning and late at night. But I know that's different for everybody. So I think it's manageable if you have, if you have an understanding family, if you have a family, and it's manageable if you have, the ability to schedule appropriately and just be ready to be flexible.
Excellent, thank you. That was great. And one more question from a student was, how did you feel the application process went? How did you feel about the classes? And one of the hesitations they have is networking because the courses are only online.
Oh, well, I'll address the last point first about networking. You're going to hear this a lot in the program, and you're not going to realize it until you actually get your feet wet. The networking, because, I had the same hesitation about networking and getting to know people and working in group projects because it's online. That's a little intimidating. Believe me when I tell you that you'll actually bond better and have better, stronger collaborative relationships with people because you're forced to be more collaborative. I mean, you're constantly, when I worked on the Capstone project, my team and I were talking multiple times a day. We were texting with each other. We got to meet several times, because we were traveling together. So I never at one time ever felt like there was a lack of networking. I actually felt closer and more bonded to my cohort than I did in undergrad. And my professors, it was the same thing. I felt like you're constantly communicating with professors. You don't feel as intimidated because you don't have to walk up to them at the end of class. You know, you can just casually email them, talk to them on the phone, and so that barrier is kind of lifted. And I mean, the professors in this program are amazing. They're the best, you know, some of the best people, biggest experts I've ever met in my life, and they're just willing, they're there to help you. And then I think there was a question about the application process. I felt like the application process was pretty smooth. I found out that I got into the program like within the same month that I applied. It moved pretty quickly, and I know that that varies, but I didn't feel like it was particularly overwhelming. I did get the GRE waiver, so that might have made the process easier, but I felt like it moved pretty quickly. I really liked my admissions counselor as well, so that helped.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'll go ahead and take a couple other questions here. One of the questions were, what time are the online classes held? I just want to let you know that typically they're once every other week. Sometimes they're once a week. They're usually after 5:30 p.m. Pacific time between Monday and Thursday. That's the typical times, okay? And then also, someone else asked if they were previously denied for the program, can you reapply? You most definitely can. I can tell you how to improve your chances of getting into the program. Another student asked if we were different online compared to campus for the admissions process. There's minor differences. As far as requirements, I'm not aware of any differences in requirements of the program as far as GRE scores or GRE waivers or GPA. I'm not aware of that. We can always have you talk with campus to make sure, but from what I understand, they're very, very similar. And as far as, see if we have any other questions. Go ahead, next question. Okay, one question was about the letters of recommendation, yeah, you do not need an academic letter, so that's fine. You can use all professional, even if it's for an internship or a part-time job or a full-time job or volunteering, as long as it's, I would recommend someone in a leadership position for those letters. And if you're not sure, you can always do 4 or 5 letters if you want to check it. I can always look at the letter and let you know if it's a good letter or not, if we need to get a different one there. The application requirements, let's see here. We already answered that question. Go ahead and go to the next one. Go up. Okay, so if you request a GRE waiver, are you still eligible for scholarships? So the Price School scholarships, there's a Dean's Merit and there's various fellowships. You do need to take the GRE for those. You cannot get a waiver. There may be some through USC, but as far as through the Price School, from what I've been told, is you need the GRE for those. Okay, so the statement of purpose. I would really like to go over that with you guys individually. I know some are curious about how the statement of purpose works. I can give you a lot of suggestions on that once we talk. I can even send you some recommendations on writing that. You do want it about 700 to 1,000 words. You want to stay away from narrative. You want to stay away from explaining your whole resume. It's really about what is the purpose of getting this. Why did you choose USC? What are your goals? Okay. The next question is going to be, is there an in-person MPA at the Sacramento location? There is a MPA at the Sacramento location. If you'd like more information, I definitely recommend going to the Sacramento website. and talking with them. Not sure, is there any difference from the online pathway? I think we covered most of that. The Sacramento campus and the LA campus have very similar programs, but I do recommend talking with that department. Okay, as far as one person asked, how long does it take for a decision to be made regarding a prospective student? It could be days, and it could be, typically it's about 2 weeks, but it could be 2 to 4 weeks. It really depends if your application goes through extra review. But usually doesn't take that long if you're applying for the upcoming semester. If you're applying for later semesters, it will take longer for that, especially if you apply for scholarships that will take quite a while. As far as what is the average age of student? I'm 55, well, I'll be out of place. I can answer a different version of that question. So the average experience for the program is about 10 years. So you'll get a lot of students with 20 plus years experience. You'll get some students with 2 years, a lot of students with around 5 to 10 years. So it's a very diverse group of students as far as academic and professional background. So from what I've seen, well, Kristin, maybe you can answer. I mean, how did you feel about the diversity of the program as far as background, professionally or academically?
Oh, yeah. So, you know, in terms of age diversity, I mean, it runs the gamut. And often what I found is that there's no difference in terms of, you know, people adding value to a project, for example. Like a lot of times you get newer undergraduate, you know, people who just graduated from college, and they bring different experiences. They understand technology. And you have people, I mean, one of my best friends in the program is in his 50s. And he, you know, has a wealth of experience. He's worked in every sector. And every time I worked with him, he, you know, he was just full of wisdom and you know, and then of course there were people somewhere in the middle like me. And, you know, just in terms of background, I'll give you a really good example. For my capstone project, the teams are carefully selected, and I had a political background. One of my teammates is actually the VP engineering of Thomas Built Buses. She's an engineer with like decades of experience. And then we had a veteran who is actually a parole officer and somebody who worked in HR with a defense contractor. So our group was extremely diverse, and it was carefully selected. I mean, we all brought something to the table for our clients. So, I mean, you get everybody from engineers, teachers, new graduates, to people who have worked. I had a classmate who worked in banking for like 30 years and then just decided to go public sector. So I'd say diverse. I never felt like anybody was ever ostracized. You know, I never felt alone. Very diverse. Everybody's learning from each other.
Perfect. A lot of students asked that question, so that was a great question. All these were great questions. Now, we're coming to a close here, but I highly recommend having a conversation with an advisor here. It will likely be myself. I will help you with whatever information that you need. I will email you information. I'll gather information. We're here to help. So I recommend before you really go deep into the application process to speak with us. And then I wanted to say thank you so much, Kristin, for coming and hosting this webinar. And it was so helpful. Students really want to hear from someone that's gone through the program. And I really...
Thank you. My pleasure. It was my pleasure. I love it. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Well, we're going to go ahead and end, but everyone have a great day. If you missed part of the webcast, you will be able to go back and watch a recording as well. All right. Thank you very much.